This is the Chapter 1 lecture. We're going to cover some of the highlights of Chapter 1, some of the material you may not find in your textbook, but this little mini lecture is not meant to be a substitution for reading. It's kind of meant to prime you for the reading. So let's get started. Chapter 1 is a foundational chapter, but the basic concepts are very important for this entire course. A good way to start is to think about why you're here. And most students are taking a nutrition class because they need it for their nursing program. The next question is, why is it required in nursing programs? And we'll touch upon that through the entire semester. Certainly, nurses need to understand nutrition because they need to understand the factors that can contribute to disease and also can help their patients recover. Basic definitions include things like nutrition and nutrients and essential nutrients. Be sure that you understand them. And as you go through this lecture, take note that there are quite a few links that we won't take time to click into, but I do expect you to click into them on your own. So you can find these slides at the end of the Unit 1 module. Be sure to go through the slides and enter all the links and do the reading or the watching that's required. One of the things that we might add to this list of basic definition is food. What is food, for goodness sakes? There's a lot of different ways to think about it. An author named Michael Pollan thinks about food as either food or an edible food-like substance. He's written a book called Food Rules. It's a short book you can read probably in less than an hour with some kind of snappy little rules around food. So things like avoid food products that contain more than 5 ingredients. If it does have a lot of ingredients, he would consider that an edible food-like substance. If it does not, more likely to be food. Eat food that will eventually rot. Therefore, it is food. If it's loaded up with additives and doesn't rot, then it's an edible food-like substance. So you get the point. Take a minute to read these. Some of them kind of cause you to chuckle, but they bring home the point that there's a big difference in the type of food we're eating. Is it heavily processed or ultra processed, or is it closer to the natural state, something we sometimes call whole foods? Your Chapter 1 will introduce you to the 6 classes of nutrients. Throughout this course, we will cover these nutrients in depth. So right now it's just an introduction. But remember, when you're introduced to concepts, that helps you learn them later. You're laying down the networks in your brain. We'll also talk about alcohol and phytochemicals in this course as well. Now, taking a nutrition class or thinking of nutrition, you may think that we talk about calories. Kcalories are units that measure energy, and of course we need energy, not only for physical activity, but to run our body's processes. Carbs, fats, and protein provide that energy. So again, fuel is essential. The average energy needs of Americans is considered to be 2,000, but there are wide differences around that. Some of you may have requirements closer to 1,500, and some may have requirements closer to 3,000-4,000 calories per day. Little bit of nutrition math is introduced to you, and some kind of nutrition math numbers. So carbs, a pure gram provides 4 calories, protein the same, and fat more than double. Alcohol is not a nutrient but provides 7 calories. Right off the bat, you can see that fat provides a lot of calories, even the healthy fats, by the way. So something like avocados or olive oil, which we encourage, we also have to keep in mind that they do provide a lot of calories that may or may not be a concern to the individual depending upon their diet as a whole. We can use these numbers to calculate the number of calories in a food if we know the grams carb, protein, and fat. So knowing these numbers, we would multiply carbohydrates, 45 times 4, protein times 4 and fat times 9 and add them together. Be sure you can do this math because you'll have a math question like that on your exam. Before we get deeper into nutrition, I think it's really, really important that we understand the many factors that influence our food choices. This is really worth a minute for you to sit and think about. What was the last thing that you ate or drank? And then why did you eat or drink it? When we have this conversation, it can really blow up to covering a whole lot of things from emotions to values. Very often at the top is availability and convenience and economy. All of these factors can become important. And if we want to inspire others to change food behaviors in order to be healthier, we have to understand why they're eating what they're eating in the first place. So this is an important study. You will see video bites throughout these lectures. Remember, you can find these links in the slides. I would encourage you to listen to these video bites. Remember that this nutrition course is very content dense. There's a lot of information to be covered in 6 weeks. The more that you think about that information, the more likely you'll remember it. And these video bites do just that. They encourage you to think about the information. So Chapter 1 also takes a look at the reasons we encourage people to change. Okay, so how does food influence our health? We clearly know that Americans are not eating enough of the healthy food and eating too much of the ultra-processed foods and all of the substances in that food. We also know that the leading causes of death are non-communicable diseases, what used to be called chronic diseases. And a number of these chronic diseases are influenced by lifestyle, including diet. So diet does affect risk for heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes type 2. I would also throw in respiratory disease because asthma is much more common in obese children. I would throw in cognitive decline because we know that there are diets, Mediterranean-like diets, that can decrease the risk of cognitive decline significantly. I would throw in kidney disease because hypertension and diabetes can increase the risk for kidney disease. So there are quite a few of the major causes of death that are influenced by diet. Therefore, encouraging Americans to change their diets should decrease the numbers of these cases. Now, it's not only about lifestyle. We certainly know that genetics comes into play, and we have to respect that. But it's also important to understand that there's an interplay between genes and diet. Kind of interesting, and this is a bidirectional type of interplay. So we know that genes influence how susceptible someone is to the impact of their diet. You probably know someone who lived to 95, ate all the wrong things, smoked cigarettes, etc., and stayed relatively healthy. That's rare, but it's possible, and a lot of that is based on their genes. But we also know that your diet influences your genes. Your diet and lifestyle can determine whether certain genes, for instance, for type 2 diabetes, are expressed, which is kind of cool. You may have this running in your family, but that doesn't mean necessarily that you will develop type 2 diabetes, and you can lower the risks significantly by the way you live. So that should encourage you to then ask, well, okay, I'm sold. What is a healthy diet? And of course, this entire course, we will be looking at just that. But Chapter 1 introduces you to some terms around a healthy diet, like nutrient density. Definitely understand what nutrient density is. Look to your textbook. There's another term called energy density. Energy density looks at how many calories are packed in a given weight of food. Both of these meals have 600 calories, surprisingly, but this one is much more energy dense. Lots of calories packed in that little weight of food compared to the meal underneath. And what we know is when you choose more low energy dense foods, you're less likely to have problems with weight. These foods are higher in fiber, higher in fluid, higher in bulk, tend to fill you up. You perhaps will stay satisfied for longer and may not eat as much. Your textbook introduces you to the chapter of substitution. And I think this is really important. For far too long, we've based nutrition advice on a list of don'ts. People need to understand there's also a list of do's and sometimes a list of instead of. So these are the instead ofs. Some of them make sense to me. Skinless chicken breast, broiled instead of nuggets, fried, a baked potato instead of French fries. One of them doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And I get that these both are apple based, but when I try to kind of think up a substitution for a patient, I look at what they're substituting for. What is it they were looking for in that particular food? And with apple pie, I see smooth, I see savory and sweet, and the crunchy apple might not be a good substitution, but a baked apple sprinkled with cinnamon would be much closer. Variety is important, especially, of course, when you're looking at a variety of healthy foods. And balance. In this case, we're looking at balancing calories with our activities so as to manage weight. Do keep in mind, however, that all of these have little pitfalls with regards to balance. Sometimes we promise ourselves if we order the more expensive version in the fast food or coffee place, will later that day take a long jog, and that does not come to pass. So we have to be realistic too. Moderation, something Americans struggle with. We tend to like a lot of everything, get our money's worth, but moderation is important because when we go for quantity, we also may get much too much in terms of calories, fat, sugar, sodium, etc. Video bites, make sure you listen to them. So we'll be talking about how to make food changes that stick. You'll be considering that in your Nutrition Applied for sure. This chapter also introduces you to nutrition as an evidence-based or science-based discipline, and that's really important to understand. Nutrition recommendations do change over time, but they change because we have the science to generate those changes. Okay, we base things on science. So when you study nutrition, you need to understand the scientific method. You need to understand the different types of studies and the strengths and weaknesses of each. That's important. And you need to understand the ethical considerations in those scientific studies. So we have just a couple of other content areas to look at in Chapter 1. This is one I kind of slip in here because I think it's important. There's lots of information out there with regards to nutrition, and your patients and clients will bring you just plenty of it to evaluate. You really need to understand that it takes an informed, educated consumer in order to evaluate this information. You will often be helping patients to determine whether things are reliable. So we certainly need to know what are good sources, and we need to know what are the traps as far as nutritional products and devices, because it's easy to fall into these traps. Many health issues, weight issues are so frustrating. When you hear about something that sounds easy, why not give it a try? And sometimes that try can be just a waste of money, but may not harm your health. Other times it could harm your health. So we have to be very careful. We have to understand that the website is full of a mix of information, some strong and reliable and some not. And we need to understand that the term nutritionist can be used by someone with very little education to back that claim. Both Charlie and Sassafras ordered their nutrition and dietary consultants over the mail with just a check. So this shows you that they are not reliable nutrition consultants. Who you should be listening to, of course, are registered dietitians who have a quite extensive educational and practical component to their education. I had an undergraduate degree, a master's degree, an internship, and of course I have to complete a good deal of continuing education to stay up to date. This is required to call myself a registered and licensed dietitian. There are also nutrition professionals with advanced degrees that are very knowledgeable who are not registered dietitians. Notice the links. Be sure to take a look into them. So nurses are very strong members of the nutrition team. Dietetic technicians are 2-year degree professionals, but besides the dietetic technicians, nurses have more nutrition education than any of the others. Dietitians depend on you. We form a good team. We really do. When we talk about nutrition information and how to evaluate it, one of the products that's a great one to look at is apple cider vinegar, because everyone knows something about what apple cider vinegar is supposed to do for our health or for our safety. What I ask students to do in the classroom is do a little search and find some reliable sources and learn what they can about apple cider vinegar. And then we talk about this list. I use consumerlab.com quite a bit. I'm a member. There's a very low fee for this, and I do it just so I can give some consultation on supplements and evaluate supplements for my family as well. But consumerlab.com is very evidence-based. They are not supported by any industry or the government. And this is the information that I found on consumerlab.com. Essentially, the only thing that seems to be moderately exciting is that it seems to slow stomach emptying and may reduce the rise in blood sugar after eating. There's only a modest help with weight loss, and the rest of the claims really are not founded in science. And in fact, you can actually harm your esophagus if you take acetic acid levels that are too high. So evaluate products for sure. Now that's the end of our lecture, but I wanted to quickly show you what I mean by this is kind of an introduction or primes you for the reading. You're in an accelerated 6-week course, and you are led through a number of activities for each chapter. So you finish the lecture. The next thing you need to do is actually the reading before the reading quiz. So you want to scroll down and you'll find the chapter units right underneath. So you've got 5 sections to read of chapter 1, and then you can go back and complete the reading quiz. Okay? And then you move on from there. There's a video quiz as well and a discussion. All right, take care.